good afternoon, depending on the time in which you see this. Sarah Purdue, and this is obviously addressed mostly to the BINO Nation, but one of the discussions that kind of stuck in my mind over the last 24 hours, given one of the topics that I posted yesterday about when we were discussing the Ruidoso fires and the possibility, and this still has not been confirmed yet, still haven't seen anything on this on it in the news, but the rumor being that it was initiated, human-caused, out of a resentment that somebody had that was a member of the reservation that is adjacent to the city of Ruidoso, or the town of Ruidoso, and a resentment they had with their representatives, and the fact that this, if the story is true, that their motivation and their mindset was a byproduct of a dependency mindset because of the fact that where they live is, and how they live is not in an ownership or on a personal stewardship standard, but rather that they're possibly a member of a dependency class. My thinking then afterwards, given that we're having a lot of discussions around civil rights and war on poverty, which is the Great Society from 1965, and the Civil Rights Act and all that other stuff, and my mind just kind of drifted into, all right, so even if you have the right to vote, but you're a member of the dependency class, do you really have civil rights? We're thinking about, right? So, okay, I'm not currently a property owner, but I have the ability and the incentive to go ahead and make that happen if I'm able to live correctly in life. And I don't want to count on or be dependent to somebody else or the state itself, right? So that affords me a level of freedom to where once I become a property owner, then I have the ability to become the steward of my assets, and basically, as an outgrowth of that, the steward of the things in my life, right? That's real freedom. So, if I belong to a dependency class, or let's use the Native American example again. If I'm a Native American person and I live on a reservation versus, say, a Native American person who either lives out in the country or lives in town, works in town, and is fully independent, and, I buy my property or pay a lease on a property that I'm using, or I'm managing my own affairs on my own, versus the one who lives on the reservation, maybe pays a stipend towards a house that is government housing, but I never really have a say in what I can do with that property. As long as I stay on that reservation, everything that I do, such as my health care, such as my personal property decisions outside of maybe a vehicle that I might own, That's all decided by forces that are outside of me, right? Indian reservations are federal land. They're managed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a subdepartment of the Department of the Interior, which is a cabinet-level government department. So all the decisions based upon that are exterior to me, right? Or let's say that I'm a person who lives in the inner city, and I live in a housing project, and maybe I receive some sort of assistance in regards to purchasing my food. I don't have control over those things. Yeah, I may still have the right to vote, and we'll discuss that a little bit later too. But am I really free if I'm living in a dependency state? Let's take that out further. Do I really have all of my civil rights if I'm living in a dependency state? Okay? And I use those two examples because they're very real examples. Let's look at somebody who's on an EBT card. Okay, yes. They use that EBT card, and as long as they stay within the confines of what's on that card, they can buy whatever they want at the grocery store. I've seen people make very wasteful decisions with their EBT money on the type of nutrition that they buy. They use it, but it's only within the limits of that card. And the way that a lot of assistance programs are set up is you have to be below a certain income level, and if you go above it, then you lose that assistance. So in a way, it's a soft form of slavery. Okay? So if I go to Uncle Sam and I tell him, okay, look, I'm struggling here, I need some help. Well, Uncle Sam's going to tell me, all right, that's great, fine, but in order for me to give you the help that you say that you need, you cannot make more than X. And if you do, then you're completely cut off. So is that really assistance? No, it's not. Okay? So in ways, I'm walled in. All right? If I'm living in a housing project, I'm outside of being able to determine, even in some cases, what color. Well, no, that's a bad example. In some cases, I'm outside of being able to determine that, I don't like these linoleum floors. I'd much rather have, or even the painted concrete floors. I'd much rather have tile or a certain kind of carpet. Well, as long as I'm living in something that I'm either paying very minimally for, or that I'm getting for free that belongs to the state, I don't have the freedom to make that decision. Okay? One of the content creators that I follow, his name is Angryman, or The Angryman, online on YouTube and other social media platforms. He keeps talking about the slave mentality, primarily geared towards his demographic, or a certain demographic, but this is kind of a human thing, right? Now, about the mindset of the people that it is rumored started these fires in south central New Mexico. And, you know, the seeds of resentment, the seeds of whatever conflict was going on there, I indicated that if this is true, that there's no sense of ownership, there's no sense of stewardship, there's only a sense of operation and emotion, right? So, for example, myself, I don't own property right now, I'm renting, but I am employed, I am working hard, and the game plan is to be able to attain that for myself. So, I'm only enslaved by the debts that I take. But I have the decision, or I have the freedom to make those decisions because I am out gaining for myself, or trying to gain for myself. I'm able to have the freedom, the civil right, to make decisions upon the assets and the lifestyle that I want to live. And the better that I manage myself, or the more that I push myself, the better that I manage my resources that I attain, the more that I plan, the more that I think, and the more that I strive, you know, the freer that I am, right? But I have the civil right to make those decisions, okay, to rise and fall on my own merits. So, you know, we talk about, for instance, individuals who live on Native American reservations and the lack of property rights that they have there. We talk about people who live in the projects or who are on assistance. We talk about the Great Society of 1965. Which kind of set the tone, or set the program for how the dependency class lives today, right? And then we realize, and I've talked about this before, I know the Anger Man has talked about this before as well, further back in his past, where, you know, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was supposedly a great victory, and that's true. I mean, it's absolutely appropriate that every human being have the ability, or have the freedom, to speak politically the way that they would like to speak, so long as they're not a communist or a fascist or socialist and desiring to destroy the freedoms of their neighbors or other people. Yeah, but you know, they should also have the freedom to govern their lives as they see fit, and to sink or swim on their own merits. When the welfare system was originally created in the 1930s, even though it was created by a leftist, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a progressive, it was sold to us as a safety net for those who, for reasons of illness, reasons of unforeseeable circumstances of misfortune in life, for reasons of physical disability or an accident or something like that, as merely a safety net, and hopefully only a temporary thing until somebody was able to get back on their feet again. When we got to the Great Society, we started seeing the uptick in, the construction of housing projects and the structuring of the assistance system to where, in many cases, the income earner of the family, predominantly the men, disqualified people from getting assistance, or the system was set up to where the person could gain more fiduciary value by removing an income earner, the man, at the time, from the household, and abide by certain restrictions that they could qualify for assistance. But it kind of set up a situation where the individuals within that system could not report. I'm going to say report because obviously some people do work on the black market. Report above certain levels of income, which we would call, like the poverty lines, like household poverty lines and stuff like that. So it was kind of a, hey, you'll do better if you can get the minimum wage laborer out of your house. We'll pay you a little bit more, but don't go to work. As long as you're not going to work or you're not working too much, then we got you, right? We'll take care of you. It's another manifestation of the bigotry, or the soft bigotry of low expectations. And I've said before that it's almost like certain demographics that once they were freed from slavery, then for 100 years they were trying to be suppressed by force, and in spite of that they were still able to make certain levels of progress. So it was kind of a bait and switch to where they're like, okay, well, in spite of our efforts to try to disenfranchise and control them by force of law or by actual physical force or intimidation, maybe we can control them or get them to give up their freedom by a soft sell, and for them to do it to themselves on a generational basis, right? So one has to really ask. For example, a Native American who lives on the reservation and cannot ever possibly own that land in which he occupies, or those groups of people who live in those areas, right? Because they're federally owned, they're not theirs. They can't have the freedom to, in their community, without having permission from the state, to say ranch. Okay, so let's say they want to raise cattle. They want to farm. Well, they might be able to do that if the state says, or the government says, yeah, we got a good environmental statement on this. Yeah, you can do that. But if the government changes their mind, well, then all of a sudden that opportunity is taken away from them, right? Here in New Mexico, several of the Native American reservations are in places where we're up in the mountains and there's a lot of timber. And depending on how the government feels environmentally at the time, well, yeah, maybe you'll have the permission to harvest your timber. But if another administration comes in, oh, nope, we're going to shut it down. Or, you get up on the Colorado Plateau, and there's a lot of Indian land up there. There's also a lot of oil, uranium, and coal. Some places there's gold and silver. And that provides the potential for a lot of development, employment, economic freedom, and, well, okay, one administration says, yeah, go ahead, do that, and then 4 to 8 years later, another administration comes in and, well, we don't like the environmental impact on this, or whatever. Nope. Change your mind and they pull it away. But the individuals involved in that system, in that dependency state or in that dependency system, are always at the mercy of somebody or a force outside of them. In this case, the state, the government, as to the decisions that they can make regarding the progress of their life, right? Okay, what's going on? So, when that happens, it's kind of can we, there's a big hill here, I guess. Do we have, do they really have civil rights? Do they? Do they? Or are they in bondage without chains? A soft slavery at the whim of somebody external to them, or a power external to them? And the answer is yes, right? So now let's look at the other dependency classes, okay? So the welfare system, the housing projects. We could say, okay, well, if there's more Hispanic people that use that, absolutely. A lot of them do. We could say that there's a lot of poor white people that use it, and there are a very large number of them. And then we could say there is a whole lot of African American people that use this, right? And we look at the Great Society, and we look at Lyndon B. Johnson. I told you. Lyndon B. Johnson is a racist, or was a racist. Through the late 1940s, after World War II, all the way up to the time that he was on the Kennedy ticket, every executive action, say for example, by Truman when he integrated the military, by Eisenhower when under him a lot of civil rights legislation was starting to come into motion. You know, and you had like Rosa Parks, Brown versus Board of Education. Every Supreme Court case or decision regarding civil rights in the 1940s and 1950s, that dude, Lyndon Johnson, fought tooth and nail. He was a Southern Democrat. He was a Dixiecrat, right? Up until the time he got on the Kennedy ticket, and then of course, what happened to Kennedy, and through the process of succession, he became president. Now all of a sudden, he's the civil rights guy. So we get civil rights for the Voting Act of 1964. And then the very next year, we get the Great Society. We all know about the Great Society, right? And some of Johnson's best friends in Congress were people like Marcus Hollings. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the KKK Grand Wizard that was in the Senate out of West Virginia, that dude was in there for a long time. You know, those were his buddies, right? And when he was the majority of the leader in the Senate, or the minority leader, actually he was the minority leader longer because the Eisenhower years, well, he just fought civil rights all the way, right, until it was advantageous for him and the Democrat Party to do what they did in the mid-60s. Then we get the Great Society, right? Oh, we're going to take care of black people. We're going to take care of poor white people. We're going to take care of the Native Americans. We're going to take care of poor Hispanic people, right? So, those are the classes, or even the races, or the demographics that people like a Margaret Sanger, oh yeah, she was an honorary member of the KKK, now founder of Planned Parenthood. Once abortion became legal, her organization very strategically placed their clinics close to black neighborhoods, poor black neighborhoods, I should say, poor white neighborhoods, you know, the poor Hispanic neighborhoods full of, or neighborhoods or towns, full of what she would call weeds. You see a pattern developing here. So, if you live in the projects and you're on welfare, or if you live on a Native American reservation and you can't possibly own the land, and you've bought into all the tropes, and in doing so have relinquished by choice or generationally relinquished these things, and now have been brainwashed into believing certain things about your own powerlessness to achieve because of, as Aaron Clary likes to say, the Republicans in the Senate, right? Or the white people as a whole. Not particular white people, just the white race as a whole. Or, you know, the Asian people who came over and earned all the money or whatever, right? If you bought into that, all of that stuff, and then voluntarily for civil rights? The answer is no, you don't. So, if you believe all these Democrat lies that you were sold since 1965 about the Great Society, and outside of the modicum of welfare reform in the late 90s, then that was then overturned in the Obama years. Outside of that, which was passed by Republicans in Congress under Newt Gingrich in the late 90s, the claim bill came after the Republicans took over, or came before, rather, the Republicans took over Congress in 1995. That was passed in 1994. But outside of that, it's almost like, excuse me, the goal of the Great Society under Lyndon Baines Johnson and his Dixiecrats was, well, we obviously can't keep these people enslaved by force, and we obviously can't keep them disenfranchised by force. So let's sell them. Let's tell them with this Voting Rights Act that they have their civil rights, and then we'll turn around the next year and we'll sell them on a program of assistance, but we'll set it up to where if they participate in this program, they become completely dependent, and therefore it's almost like they'll enslave themselves to the will of the state. We can no longer own these people privately, and we can no longer forcibly try to control them. For example, by force of law and by physical force of law enforcement, for Jim Crow. Can't do that. That's not going to work. So we'll soft sell them on selling themselves into a form of slavery by offering them goodies. But it'll be just enough to keep them alive and keep them stupid. But it won't be to where they can, or it will penalize them to where if they try to reach the rung on the ladder, the next one up will completely kick their feet out from under them. So, it'll just keep them in there, right? And that's kind of, the whole, I'll keep these N-words, vote Democrat for 200 years. That's a Johnson quote. Go look it up. So, and then you've got like Martin Luther King, who became this civil rights icon. And you look at Jesse Jackson, who rightfully claims that he worked for King and could be considered one of his successors. Al Sharpton. And then you look at the 1939 quote from Margaret Sanger with her Negro Project, right? Talking about how they would work with certain leaders within the community and the minister and all that, to where if on this channel about this. I actually read that quote, so y'all need to go back and look at it. That, we'll settle this notion, right? Because according to her, y'all are just superstitious, ignorant people that need somebody to trust within your own community, and then, we'll get a hold of the minister or the community leader and get them on our program. And even though I don't always agree, actually I have a lot of disagreements with Malcolm X, but at least on some things he was hard right in trying to warn people about, hey, look at these liberals. They might be trying to put you back in the box. So, was there really a victory on the civil rights movement at all? Let's look at the Native Americans. Let's look at a very large sector of the African American community. Let's look at the poor white folk who are stuck way back in the hollers of West Virginia. Now those people, are they free? Do they really have all their civil rights? In our founding documents, in the Declaration of Independence, we read about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The first draft of that actually said life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. So, given that context, if I don't own anything and I'm expected to be happy, even though I can vote for my own freebies if I want to, and that's the expectation, right? Do I really have my civil rights? If I'm not, well, I shouldn't say not allowed, but if I'm not incentivized, or if I'm not left to my own merits and abilities and free will, and let's say that my peers have been educated to strongly dissuade me from seeking those things for myself and my family. And in some cases, that education of persuasion or dissuasion is strong enough to where, in some instances, if I do try to step out on my own, it could be potentially dangerous for me. Do I really have my civil rights? Or am I looking at the same product, but instead of it being painted blue, now it's painted red? Instead of it being called a widget, now it's called a gidget. What are civil rights, really? Some very serious food for thought. And if you have the right to vote Democrat, and yeah, on paper you have the right to vote Republican or Libertarian or Green Party or whatever, right? But according to Margaret Sanger in her 1939 statement, The powers of persuasion, even unto death, amongst your community, makes it difficult to do that. Well, are we still under Jim Crow? Have the Democrats just changed the language, but now we're still in effect, de facto, not de jure, but de facto under Jim Crow? Let's look at I keep saying that the Native Americans are like, just a little bit further down the chain, right? Because of how, well, they're not forced to stay on the reservation, but how they're enticed very strongly to live, right? But if you have a mindset like mine, you look at that and you're like, well, what the fuck, man? These are people too. They should be encouraged to and should have the ability to do all the same things and aspire to all the same things that I should be able to do. And if they want to keep their traditions, have their land, well, by all means. I mean, all right, great. How about they own it? How about they have the same freedoms on their supposed land, which we say is theirs, but they don't really own, as I do. If I were to own my property, or, do you understand? So, under the Democrats and their great society, y'all were sold a bill of goods. Y'all are still in Jim Crow, but it's called something else. And as long as you continue to vote Democrat, you're voting for Jim Crow, but it's just called something else. Serious as a heart attack. As long as you stay in that system, now you're coming under Jim Crow by your own design through the Great Society. And you're expected to live like an animal. That's what they want you to do. Don't you understand? I'm going to email this to Angerman, and I hope to God he chops this up. But I got to go in here and use the restroom. I'm actually in the truck today working, but y'all have an excellent day. I need y'all to really think about this. I'm going to close with this thought. Dr. Thomas Sowell, and you can listen to this essay because it is available on YouTube. He wrote an essay called The Black Redneck Culture, and he went into all the history of this and everything else. I need all of you to listen to it. Everybody who's in the welfare system. But we know who that system was primarily targeted towards. Native Americans and black people, primarily. And yes, undesirable white people and undesirable Hispanic people as well. Yes, they're part of that, but those are the biggest targets. I want all of you to listen to Dr. Sowell's essay, because in the projects, y'all are, and under the Great Society, y'all are still under Jim Crow voluntarily. Y'all have a blessed day.